Hi, this is Kelsey Cooper, and I'm the host for Disabled Birth Stories podcast. I hope those in the disabled community can enjoy these stories of bringing beautiful babies into the world and the journey along the way. I hope this podcast helps you feel seen, heard, empowered, and capable, no matter your journey to being a parent. I hope those who are able-bodied would listen to empathize with and support their disabled family member, friend, acquaintance, or random stranger. Thank you for listening, and feel free to email me if you have any questions or would like to be featured on the podcast at disabledbirthstories@gmail.com. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please consult your medical providers for all of your healthcare needs. Also, the views and opinions expressed by the guests are not necessarily the views and opinions of the host and vice versa. Thanks for joining us today. After listening to this episode, please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please also check the description for our social media links and the link to our merch store. Hi, this is Kelsey Cooper, and I'm back with Gabby, and she's going to tell us about her social work and perinatal work. Gabby, can you explain your career field and what you do?
Yeah, definitely. I can start by explaining what the word perinatal is. So the way that I see it is any point is in preconception where you're thinking about becoming a parent to pregnancy to the first year postpartum. So this is sort of how I see the perinatal period, so that we ensure to include people who are having challenges with fertility and who've experienced losses in that definition of support. I'm a trained social worker who provides psychotherapy in my private practice as well as consulting. And when I say consulting, I consult around projects such as like disability and sexuality projects. I run workshops. I actually facilitate like a course on working with parents with disabilities, working with individuals who are involved in the children's aid system and how to support them with that, as well as like consulting on research if somebody's asking me my perspective on conducting a research study on this area.
What would a consult for preconception and preparing for pregnancy for a disabled person look like?
Yeah, so I think that it would be just really talking to the person about what their goals are in that moment, where they're at, depending also where they're at in that stage, and helping them connect with a family doctor if they don't have one, helping them connect with a fertility, I can help with that, fertility clinic, talking about some of the things that they should be considering in terms of maybe possible funding to access or how things are going to be different, or looking into their housing and seeing if they have space for the baby there, what that would look like, how we could reorganize things, their support system, who that is, relationships that they have either with their partner or other people in their support network. And a lot of the stuff I will say premise this is that it's the same thing I would do if you didn't have a disability. So just like, it's not just specific to that. This is sort of what happens in our assessment. I think when you have a disability, when you talk about being told that they wanted to have a baby as well, but I think I would do that regardless also. But what people are saying, how they're feeling about it, if they have any concerns about becoming pregnant, what their concerns are, who's best to answer that, exploring if they have any other like anxieties about it, what kind of their timeline is, where do they see that they're maybe needing some extra support. So really letting them lead the conversation and like figuring out what needs to happen prior to becoming pregnant. When you go to a fertility clinic here, they actually make you talk to like a social worker for like one session. I, to be honest, found that incredibly unhelpful. But I think because I was coming at it from a very different circumstance, and I had done a lot of research, and to see her report, which they sent to you, to be like, she should continue to look into like funding and resources, which she told me after it was like a placeholder, something she puts in everyone's like, she should continue to look for resources or other that. I really found that like quite insulting. I'm like, let's have a quiz about all the resources. I'm sure that I would win this quiz, but so I think I really don't want to assume that I know best, and just really asking the client what they're worried about. If they're coming to me, they obviously came for a reason. And sometimes it's even about their mental health history, regardless of disability. It's like, Well, I have anxiety now. What's it going to be like when I'm pregnant or postpartum? Like, yeah, hard to predict that. What we know is it increases your risk of having perinatal anxiety and you challenges. So why don't we work towards a plan to support you, not discourage it, right? Like, and a lot of misconceptions around mental health as well, like getting off medication because you're pregnant, feeling like you can't be on any medication when you're pregnant, especially with regards to your wound. So really trying to break free of some of those misconceptions and getting them connected to the appropriate provider that can support them.
Would the consult change much if they come to you once they are already pregnant?
It always goes back to like what are their goals. So if they're coming to me, like what's going on right now, are there challenges that they're experiencing, stigma, people's judgment, lack of support, is it their mood that's affecting them, especially with the disability, like how they're gonna do certain things. Like maybe they're looking for unique ways to hold a baby or unique ways to, get around with the baby, but they don't really know who to ask about that. Different considerations in terms of like how do you connect with other service providers? So that in terms of a consultation, a lot of times I provide like ongoing therapy. So that would be like weekly or bi-weekly sessions throughout their pregnancy and postpartum to support their mood. Typically, those are really it's like coping strategies, utilizing a variety of different therapeutic modalities like cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, narrative therapy, solution focused.
Moving into postpartum once the baby's here, is that the same weekly sessions, and does it move into how they parent and adaptability or anything like that?
Yeah, I think weekly sessions can be really hard for new parents to really keep up with. I try to be as flexible as possible in terms of my cancellation policy because I know how it is with newborns and kids when they get sick or, when they're older, but also on a newborn, you're not sleeping, you're tired, the baby's not really on a schedule. So try to be as flexible as possible in terms of like support. I also spend a lot of time providing psychoeducation around like child development, like infant development, what's typical. There's so many misconceptions out there. Like you have to be teaching your baby this, and you have to be like making sure they know how to self-soothe and don't pick them up too much. And so I really try to provide some psychoeducation around infants' development, where their brain is at, and what they are and what they are not able to do, control what skills that they actually have, which are, not what people think that they have at the ages that they do. So I do provide that, but again, that's across the board. And I think with disability could be things coming up for them. It's a big realization. I wasn't shocked about how the lack of sleep I got and the fact that the baby was like, yeah, up all the time, needing constant feedings, changing constant diapers, and just like the day-to-day things. But I was really confronted with my abilities. And I think that that's the part that's really unique about working with parents with disabilities, that parenting can be confronting. Having a baby and parenting with a disability can be very confronting. Every day I'm confronted with what I can and cannot do for her. And although parts of that are getting better because she's getting older and a bit more like, she sort of listens. She's only 2. But she's able to like step up on my wheelchair so I could hold her. Like there's so many things that I still wish I could do. And I think it is very confronting that your life isn't the same, but that's also across the board with or without disability. But when you have a disability, it's about what you can and can't do and how we define what a parent is, especially a mother. Well, a mother is the one that does everything physical for their kids. They cook, they clean, they change all their diapers, they feed them, they play with them, they're doing all of these things. And a lot of them are physical tasks that people with disabilities struggle with. Like, I don't really clean, Oh, and now they're if you saw me vacuum, you would think it was hilarious. Like, it's just not a thing that I do. I don't really cook either. I have people that help me with that. I buy all my own groceries, pick out what we're going to eat. But I'm not trying to move a boiling pot of water in my power wheelchair from like this, the stove to the sink to drink. Like, this isn't something I do regularly. Is it something I could do once in a while? Sure. But it's like these things, like what makes a mother. And I really try to tell myself and my clients the importance of the relationship between a parent and their child, not the tasks of being a parent with their child. To me, that is something that's so unique to disability, just that constant confronting of what your abilities are, what they're not, and how do you get back to that relationship with your child. To be honest, Kelsey, we have a lot to teach people who don't have disabilities about parenting. And I think other people get really caught up with the physical demands of parenting that they forget the connection, or the connection seems so hard, or that being in the moment or attuning to your child is so much more difficult when you're worried about who's going to clean your house and the dishes, right? And I think that we can allow people to have a different perspective around parenting. And I think that that's something that, as a disabled person, like, we have so many problem-solving skills. We know what's important. We can't be bothered doing all these things. Like, it's just, I would never get through my day. And so I just think that it's a really good reminder. And I really try to talk about, like, forget what you can't do. What are you able to do? What are your assistants able to help you with when you're caring for this child? Is it putting the baby and resting it on you? Is it that you're able to grab the wipes and hand it to them? Like, what can we do to kind of have you involved in every process? Maybe not doing the physical part of it.
Well, I don't know if this would relate to in the U.S., but how would someone go about finding a social worker for the perinatal period in Canada, especially? What resources can you point them to?
I mean, I'd imagine that in the States you have social workers at the hospital, but I'm not sure how. I mean, I was a social worker at a hospital. I thought, I was pretty helpful. I don't know what the system is like over there. But I also have my own private practice. There's a lot of websites, like even psychologytoday.com. I think that's US and Canadian for your location, and look for a private therapist that way. There's like Therapy Tribe. There's a bunch of websites where you can look for your own therapist. And like for me, I can only practice in Ontario with people who live in Ontario because I'm registered with the College of Social Work. So there are guidelines with that piece. But in terms of like workshops, I'm not as restricted. But I definitely think it's a good question. And I think people stigmatize therapy a lot as well. And also therapy has a financial impact, I should say, on people when they're accessing private therapy and they don't have insurance. And so that's something else to consider. So it's like, where else could you get that support? Is there a mom group? Is there persons with disabilities group that you can join? Like, is there other ways you can get support? So maybe you don't need to go to therapy once a week. You can go to therapy every other week. So it's just like, where else can you kind of buff up some of your support so that you're able to explore therapy, but also have these additional help as well. Like, I used to run a free postpartum support group, not just for parents with disabilities, like open to anyone. And it was free. It was virtual during the pandemic, and it was very popular because people could join. They didn't have to like get out of the house, get the baby in the car, get ready, like go. Like, they could just open their phone and join, meet other about where they were at, and they could hear from a mom who was 6 months along in their postpartum, someone who's 6 weeks, and just the differences, right? And getting that hope that, you know what, these long nights, they will get better. In Toronto, we do have a parenting with disabilities group, and they used to meet monthly, I believe. I'm not sure if that's still happening. It wasn't as popular, I think, as me. I didn't run it, but it wasn't as popular, I think. And I think it's just really hard because there's all this element of there's not that many parents with disabilities sometimes in the small area. And the ones that are, it's like, people are working, the people are busy, and it's hard to like meet that schedule. But I think, opening things up internationally and nationally, I should say, like, it's probably a little bit easier to find people.
Well, thank you for your information on this and coming back on to share. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely.
Thank you for listening, and feel free to email me if you have any questions or would like to be featured on the podcast at disabledbirthstories@gmail.com.